Hey guys, welcome back to True Showmance, which is Clevver's after show. And of course, we have been talking a lot about 13 Reasons Why, Season 2, which is a very controversial show. I don't know if you've noticed or not while you've been binge watching it. But today we're going to be talking about all the different controversial topics throughout the entire season 2. But with me today are two of my favorite TV experts, Sinead and Renee, who are going to help me break this all down.
Hi guys. All right, so before we get started, we want to let you guys know that we're going to be talking about some really sensitive topics on the show, obviously pertaining to 13 Reasons Why. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable, we have so many more other 13 Reasons Why videos for you guys to watch, so you guys can go check those out.
Yes, and also, I'm sure you've probably already binged Season 1 and Season 2, but in case you haven't, there are going to be a lot of spoilers ahead, so this is your heads up.
Yes, okay, now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's jump right into some of these controversial topics. Take a deep breath, everyone. Okay, the first topic is the obvious controversial topic that got Season 1 a lot of flack, was the whole storyline of suicide. Of course, Hannah Baker committed suicide at the end of Season 1, and then we have that storyline continue into Season 2 with Alex. We find out a lot of details in the first couple of episodes about how he tried to commit suicide. And a lot of people think that it is, of course, the show has been glamorizing suicide. That was one of the controversial topics that came out of Season 1. But I read this quote in the Rolling Stone that I wanted to show you guys that I felt like really summed this up perfectly. It said, "In ending her own life, Hannah gains the agency she never had before. She haunts her classmates, imposes consequences, and in a bleak final way finds justice. The series inadvertently makes Hannah's suicide look like a way for her to get a lot of things done that she couldn't have achieved by living, and that emphatically is not what suicide accomplishes." So do you guys think that Season 2 still glamorizes that, or do you think they've made that creative switch?
I mean, I definitely felt like they addressed some of the concerns that people had specifically regarding suicide. There wasn't as much in the show, but that's also not, I don't even know if that was a choice, because there was a lot of other topics that they were handling in Season 2. So maybe it didn't feel like they were, beating us over the head with it, because it really wasn't at the forefront as much as it was in Season 1.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, when it comes to suicide, I don't necessarily think they were glamorizing it this season.
Yeah, I also agree with you, Sinead. I think in this season, it was much more about the damage that her death caused, as opposed to her trying, having all of these people listen to these tapes to solve all these issues. This season was about, okay, our friend passed away, and now this is what we're dealing with. So I think it does kind of stray away from glamorizing suicide and gets more into like the true after effects that it has on everyone in your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also found that the whole rape storyline this season, I know we talked about it in Season 1 too, but that continued the theme throughout. That one really felt like it was a lot for me.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, if you felt the same way.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was throughout the whole season. I mean, we had that scene. Actually, there were kind of two iffy scenes between, we had Chloe and Bryce, two scenes that I think really spoke to the audience of, oh, this is an abusive relationship, what's going on here? And on top of that, with the Polaroids, there were images of rape victims, and this was definitely something ongoing throughout the whole season. It's a very sensitive topic. How did you guys feel about the way they handled all of the storylines that regarded sexual assault?
I didn't feel comfortable with Polaroids.
No, neither did I.
I feel like the Polaroid shots of like Bryce's butt in the air, like with the girl passed out, like that visual to me, I mean, I've never gone through something like that personally, but that was very triggering for me. I was like, I don't want to see this. I think you could just say that it happened. I don't think we need to see it happening. But I do feel like they were trying to show, because it is usually stuff like that happens behind closed doors. People don't usually have to face what that looks like. So I think they really wanted to show people, hey, this is what can happen to teenagers in high school. Adults, pay attention.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch this.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that their intention was, I 100% believe that these things really do happen. Yeah. Even that horrifying last scene. I believe that these things happen. And I'm glad that we are addressing it. I had read, somebody had tweeted, you know, like a lot of people are upset about the last rape scene with Tyler. But this, like somebody wrote that this exact same thing had happened in their high school, and like think about that person that it happened to that didn't get to talk about it, you know? So in a way it's great that we're able to see that there are things happening and schools do need to be paying more attention, especially if these things are happening on school property, in school bathrooms, in school locker rooms. But the other thing I didn't like about the topic of rape in 13 Reasons Why is the fact that not once did we see any sort of repercussions for anybody's actions. And even though that is a reality of the situation, it also kind of paints it as if the rape victims weren't getting enough attention or enough support or enough comfort because they were constantly fighting about
it doesn't matter if you speak out when something like this happens to you, because clearly this show proves that no one will do anything, and if they do anything, it's like very mild punishment. So as a rape victim, it kind of sends this message of possibly like you shouldn't really speak out because it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and that to me is a scary thing. Like that's the one thing I really did not appreciate about this season, if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah. I think what was hard for me also was just at the very end when you find out Nina is the one that burned all the Polaroids. And I get it. I couldn't even imagine having those photos out there being one of those victims. But at the same time, that was evidence that could have sent bad people away for much longer, including Bryce.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are so many beautiful things about this show too, especially with the characters that have to be there for each other in these circumstances, even if the rest of the world seems like they're against you. But for me, another kind of powerful moment is when Clay does confront Tyler at the very end, before he is able to carry out this horrible school shooting. Obviously, there is so much happening in our world every single day that this kind of scene hits a little bit harder than I think it would have had the show come out a couple years ago, let alone 10 years ago, because now it seems like we are handling situations involving school shootings all the time, which is just devastating. And I do appreciate that 13 Reasons Why did cancel their premiere party on Friday in light of the Texas high school shooting. But I don't know, what do you guys think about just the fact that they even went there with the school shooting? Like, do you think it's the right time? Do you think it's closer to them, you know, looking out for real life events, or do you think it teeters towards insensitivity, which is, I think, what people struggle with?
Well, here's kind of what I feel. I feel like because season 2 jam-packed so many of these controversial topics in kind of a fast way. I know it was 13 episodes, but I feel like there were some topics that didn't get enough exploration, and I feel like the school shooting element of that didn't get the type of tender, loving care that I feel like it needed to get in its storytelling. I think they did set it up, of course, with like Tyler practicing shooting in the woods, and like even in the like first episode, you see Clay's mom, Mrs. Jensen, no, not Clay's mom, Hannah's mom, at target practice. Like there were a lot of like gun setups, but I feel like school shootings, it's such a sensitive topic right now. They really needed to treat it a little bit more in depth and a little bit more tenderly than they did.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I think because it is such a sensitive topic, we needed more from it. And the way it was more of like a slow build-up, and then all of a sudden it was going to happen, but then Clay stopped him and he left, and that's where we left off with the show. I think it's very possible they would dive into that season 3. But I think because there was already so much going on in season 2, so many other issues they were taking on, it just felt like too much because they didn't get enough into that particular subject.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of you guys. And I feel like also Tyler, by the end of this show, had very little respect for his own life and for his peers' lives. And that is something that should absolutely be explored if there is a season 3, because just the fact that he was talked out of a school shooting does not mean that he is free from any of these demons that were put onto him by very awful things happening to him, like
Yeah.
that rape scene. And it's like, it makes a lot of sense as to why he's angry. But I think that the difference is nobody can truly understand what goes through a shooter's mind before they enter a high school or any school and proceed to shoot like aimlessly and freely. Like, I don't think that anybody actually understands that in real life. Therefore, if you're going to portray that on screen, I agree with you, Erin. I think it needs a lot more time.
Yeah, I agree. And another topic that was just so, and they emphasized it last season, but I feel like it got emphasized even more too, was this whole idea of slut shaming. You know, of course, like, people were going after Jessica, saying she was a slut this season. They were calling Hannah a slut last season. And last season I was like, this doesn't make sense creatively. Like, I don't get it. And this season I'm like, oh, it's because she like made out with a couple of guys. Like, that does not make you a slut whatsoever. And I think that with the whole slut shaming thing, I think this does more for parents watching this show, understanding, because I think when, you know, as a teenager, you go home, you're like, oh, such and such said this thing about me. Like, parents don't get it. But I think as a parent maybe watching this show, you're like, oh, this slut shaming goes deeper than just like name calling. This isn't just like a bad thing one kid said to her in the hallway. Like, this can go very, very far and cause a lot of problems in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I actually, it's absolutely controversial, yes, but I am very happy it is part of this show.
Yeah,
me too.
I agree.
This is a real issue. This is a terrible issue. I'm sure that most girls, like, I don't even feel like I'm exaggerating when I say most girls, can relate to this in one way or another, whether it's happened to them personally or it's happened to a friend or a sister or a cousin. I have seen this happen so many times. I've dealt with it personally. It is awful, because when you are in high school and people decide they know things about you, it is one of the worst feelings in the entire world, because you are so young and you know who you are on the inside, but you haven't lived enough life to be able to communicate that effectively.
Yeah.
And it really, for lack of a better word, it sucks. Like, it really sucks. So I just feel like I'm glad that this is in there, and I agree with you. Parents should know the things that are being said about.
This is so much deeper than like
for sure.
name calling, you know.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to actually touch upon was this ongoing theme of coming out this season.
Yeah.
Which what was a huge scene for me was in the courtroom with Courtney, when she came out during the trial to help Hannah and to help the case. I thought this was a really hard moment, because I feel like we've seen this character struggle with her sexuality last season, not wanting to come out, not wanting to live her truth. And finally this season she was able to do that. And I do love that though this show did not have a lot of happy endings or justice, we did get a happy ending with Courtney living her truth and being happy. But what did you guys think of this kind of theme of them also taking on characters coming out, and especially with Courtney in the public way that it happened?
Yeah, I do think it was like one of the more positive things about this
really
show.
was.
Yeah.
And I love that Courtney's parents were so supportive of her doing that. Again, another great example of like how parents should be handling situations that are facing their kids.
Yeah.
I actually wish the storyline got more attention, to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like Courtney needs more time if season 3 happens, because there's just so much more to explore there. Like, what is her experience like now? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Also, oh, look, it's Tony.
Not in a great moment, but a cute couple nonetheless.
Yes.
No, I loved their relationship throughout this season, because, Tony has been dealing with a lot, to say the least. And so to have him have a romantic interest this season that is healthy, that is good for him, that was consistent throughout the whole season, and on top of that, helping him deal with his issues. That picture we saw of that scene when Tony is breaking down and losing it over someone killing his car, by the way. I would also be very upset, but the way that he handled that, I really appreciated this relationship in this season.
I agree.
We also talked about this a couple of days ago too, when we were talking about how we appreciated this relationship, especially because they didn't have these gay stereotypes attached to it.
Yeah.
You know, which is like usually what we see in TV and movies. It's getting so old to see these these like stereotypes attached to certain types of people based on their sexuality. It's pretty lame if you ask me, because it's 2018 and nowadays
there's so much diversity.
There's so much diversity. You shouldn't be able to look at somebody and know their sexuality based on the way that they act, and that shouldn't be a standard. So I actually really loved their relationship, especially, you know, that made me very happy. Another thing that could be pretty positive is the idea of virginity, losing your virginity, and making sure that there is like consent and that both people are on board, especially when you're that young. Which obviously is like the very opposite of what we deal with mostly in the show this season, which is rape and sexual assault and sexual violence. And now we have this idea of virginity and getting consent, and it kind of shows up between Hannah and Zach.
I loved that moment, that scene where she was sitting on the dock with him and just letting him know her thoughts and opinions on virginity, because I think when you hear about in the media how it's supposed to be, how you're supposed to lose your virginity, who it's supposed to be to, when you should, I think it's refreshing to have a show of a young girl telling her opinion that may not be the absolute norm for everyone or what we see in media, but is very common.
Yeah, totally. And then one final thing I want to touch on before we leave it to you guys to comment in the comments, because there were so many controversial topics that we don't have time to discuss right here. But the idea of drug use and drug addiction was clearly a huge theme for Justin throughout the show, but it also was for Clay and Hannah too. In the flashback, we saw that they had done Molly together, and I felt like, in a way, that the idea of drugs, it wasn't glorified per se, but it definitely didn't feel, as a viewer watching it, like it's not so bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? When I feel like when Clay was like rehabbing Justin in his room, it just looked like Justin was maybe had just like some flu-like symptoms, but people actually can die from withdrawals from especially something like heroin, which is such a serious drug.
And so addictive too. What high schooler would know how to effectively detox somebody off of heroin?
And
which
to
to
not
me was
have
very
that
shocking.
like litmus test of like, this is really serious.
Yeah.
And also like high schoolers doing Molly, I know that happens in the world, but I also felt like that scene, you know, they came off of doing Molly and they were like, oh, this is what coming off feels like. But I feel like it was almost in that moment like, oh, this was a nice bonding experience between Clay and Hannah. Look how sweet this moment was. And I just don't think it happens that way for a lot of people. And as, in some sort of like passive way, I feel like it encouraged drug use. And just, I don't know, maybe that's just me that I felt that way, but
I could see that more with the Molly scenario. I will say with the heroin situation with Justin, the one thing I did appreciate about the show is they did show him almost choking while he was sleeping, and
That's
that
true.
just goes to show you can't just fix it with some like soda. What was she giving him? I don't remember. Like very high schooler, just trying to help out. But I do like that it did show how serious it can get, and also how hard it is to kick that addiction.
Yeah. Well, I almost didn't believe it as much until I saw him relapse. As devastating as it is to see somebody relapse, especially him, because I had such high hopes for him, I really did. But I was like, how do you get over heroin, which happens to be like, if not the most addictive drug out there nowadays, one of the most addictive drug, and how would you just get over that after a couple days and without a doctor's supervision?
Like as a kid being offered heroin after saying 13 Reasons Why, I'd be like, well, I mean, as long as I don't do it too much. Like it didn't feel like, oh no, I'd never try that.
Right,
you know?
right.
Okay, I lied, you guys. I told a story. I said that was our last topic, but we're going to talk about bullying before we leave, because that was such a huge thread. We can't not talk about it. Bullying was such a big deal. Do you guys feel like it portrayed what happens in reality accurately?
Well, considering how dark some of this and how terrible some of the, I can't even say some, all of the bullying is in this show, I think they did a great job showing how terrible bullying can be. And I think for those who maybe look into that this is a real thing that happens to people, it will be eye-opening, which is I think very important. We need to be having these conversations. Children should be able to open up to their parents, teenagers, talk about it. And I love that this show encourages that, and they are. And some of these characters maybe are making mistakes and not opening up to their parents, but at least the show in the back is telling you, is guiding you to do that, is letting you know that is the way to go about it. There can be a solution.
Right, and I feel like there's the power here is Like, just because something is controversial doesn't mean that it's bad, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that I agree with you, Renee. I think that these things are happening, and because of how dark it is, we see that they are taking into consideration all of the worst things that do happen in high schools, and they do happen.
Yeah.
But then other thing is the power here is to the people who see bullying happen as well and don't do anything about it, so bystanders and the people who are the ones bullying. When you look at some of the things that happen in this show, you're like disgusted. Like
Yeah.
it hurts like your heart. And you're like, how is nobody doing this? How are these people okay with this? And my hope is that if people are watching it, they become more aware of the things that are happening around them in their schools also, and hopefully that would lead to them standing up and maybe making a difference, even if they can't directly do something to end it. I just feel like it's good to get it on everybody's radars. Like, these things are happening,
Yeah.
just pay
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think too, it just puts it on their radar to be like, what if I'm bullying
Right.
someone? Like a
Yeah.
self-check
Yeah.
mechanism, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Okay, like I said, you guys, there's so much that
So
we can
many.
talk
Yeah.
about in this show. So we want to leave it up to you guys to continue the conversation in the comments. Were there any controversial topics that we missed? Weigh in the comments, and you guys don't forget to subscribe because we're hoping to be able to do the short show more often. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.
All right, guys, and then click right over here to hear about why season 2 was disappointing and possibly unnecessary. And when you're done with that, before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button right here. I think it's right here. Just click it, because then you can see more episodes, and we have a lot more content, so click it.